Look what I upcycled from a Goodwill tablecloth. Yes, that's right. I went shopping at Goodwill, one of my favorite places to go, and I found this gorgeous tablecloth. And it wasn't just a little one. I spread it out and I looked at it and thought, oh, the possibilities. So I took it home, and the first thing I made was this beautiful shirt. So back home, I decided I needed to make me a pattern. And these are the items that I have here. Pins, a rotary blade, scissors, a cushioned quilt block there so that I could put pins in it, butcher paper to make my pattern, and a shirt that fits me really well. But I don't want to cut it up, so I'm going to make... So the first thing I do at my cutting table is I lay the cushioned board on top, and then I put butcher paper on top of the cushioned board, and I put straight pins in it to hold it in place. Now my goal here is to lay my shirt out and use a stick pin method of making my pattern, and I'll show you what I mean here in just a minute. I had to slide my shirt down to leave enough seam allowance at the top there. And then I'm going to start pinning with straight pins. Right now I need to stick the pins at the top of the collar, on the back of the collar, and you'll notice I just follow the line of the shirt. Now as I'm sticking it into the paper there, it's putting pinholes into the paper. And I can even stick it in my shirt to form the front collar piece as well. This way I don't have to cut my shirt up, and I can make a pattern each time of every outfit that I really like. And this is a unique way of doing it. So here I'm doing it down the shoulder seams. And another reason that I picked this shirt is that it's drop sleeve, and there's no front and back on the sleeves. They're interchangeable, so it makes it real easy for a beginner. This is an easy sewing pattern. So here I'm putting the pins in the seam allowance of the shirt there, excuse me, of the sleeve. I'm making sure that I match up the armholes so that the seams in the armpit area match up. And then I work my way down the shirt. The reason that I worked my way down the shirt rather than just using a marker or a pen or a pencil going down the shirt is that I didn't want to accidentally mark on my shirt. And here I'm extending the pattern down with my pencil, and I'm adding about 1.5 to 2 inches longer than the shirt. Next I want to add my 1/2 inch seam allowance. As I get to the sleeve area, I just roll it up and mark, and then I go down the side. So next I remove the pins. So after the pins are out, I see all the little pin marks, and I go ahead and I draw my line according to those pin marks. I know you can't see them, but I can. And here I'm making sure that I put the pin marks in from the front collar as well as the back collar. And then for good measure, I go ahead and I check my seam allowance one more time, ensuring that I have a 1/2 inch. Here I'm showing you a 1/2 inch. And you know that saying, you measure twice and you cut once. Well, that's what I want to do here. I want to make sure I measure twice with my seam allowance to ensure that I have it exactly a 1/2 inch. I went ahead and I put my markings in marker so that you could see what I did. So here is the actual pattern that it will sew to. That's the sew line, and then the dotted lines are the seam allowance. And here I'm marking the front collar, the back collar. I'm showing you the seam allowance there. This is the bottom of the shirt with the seam allowance already in it. And now it's time to cut out my pattern. On this area right here, I just make sure that I cut out the back collar piece, and I'll show you how I adjust it so that I don't have to make two different patterns. I just cut on my dotted lines, and this will be the front of my shirt and the back of my shirt. Now it's time to do the same thing for our sleeve. And here I'm putting in the 1/2 inch seam allowance. I removed the pins like I did on the other pattern piece. I connect the pinhole dots with my pencil. And I use my marker to mark out all of the markings on the pattern piece. This says to cut on the fold. Then I cut my pattern piece out on the dotted lines. Now the fun begins. I want to see how to use this tablecloth here, and I was thinking this would make a beautiful neckline. So I take my pattern piece and I cut strips down to the front of the collar, just like this, just little strips. Then I fold those pieces down towards the front collar piece. This way I don't have to make two pattern pieces. So there's my front ready to go, and here I'm trying to line it up and figure out how I'm going to make this work. I also needed to figure out a seam allowance in there. Now, I probably could have tried to do it this way, but that pattern would be awfully close to the neckline. So I studied the tablecloth a little bit more and thought it would really be pretty having the print go across the chest area. And I also wanted to use the bottom scalps for the bottom of my shirt, but then the shirt would have been way too long if I would have done it in one piece. So I decided to modify my pattern, and I measured 9 inches down because that would allow me to have the full doily piece, the lacy piece going across my chest. I decided where I was going to place my new modified pattern piece. I weighted it down and then I cut it out, being sure that I didn't cut the center markings because I'm going to flip that pattern piece over and make it one whole piece. I'm not going to have a seam up the center. So next I flip the pattern piece over and I place it, ensuring that I have it right there in the center markings where I stopped cutting. And I place my weights on top of the pattern and I cut it out. Then I fold my pattern piece in half and I line up all of my edges, and then I make sure that all of my edges are even. And I notice that some of them are, slightly off, so I go ahead and I trim. Then I mark this piece with a little note to show that that is the front piece. I could probably tell by the low collar line, but just to be sure so I don't mix anything up, I always like to label my pieces. So next I positioned my front yoke piece onto the tablecloth and found the mirror image of it. I lay my back pattern piece out and notice those folded edges around the collar are now standing straight up, and I'm making the pattern just by drawing the line there and ensuring that I'm getting the right angle. Then I cut out the back piece. So next I cut out a bottom front and a bottom back. So I end up with two identical pieces that look like this. I do the same cutting method for the sleeves. Now I have a front and a back top, a front and a back bottom, and two sleeves. Now on to the fun stuff. We're going to get ready to sew. I go ahead and I iron all of my pattern pieces, and the next steps will fly by. It's easy to put together. With right sides together at the shoulder seams, pin your shoulders together. Now it's time to either sew and serge or just serge your shoulder seams. I'm choosing to just serge my seams together. If you don't have a serger, I would highly encourage you to sew and then maybe zigzag your edges together so that there's no chance of this fabric fraying. Next, iron your shoulder seams towards the back of your top. When I serged my seams, I went ahead and serged around the collar. It really does look nice, and it actually matches the lace on the shirt. I could have left it this way, but I decided to go ahead and fold it under and pin it, and then I'm just going to do a nice top stitch along the edge of my collar. At the sewing machine, I'm using a stitch length of a 3, and I'm using my presser foot as a guide, and I also have a magnetic guide there to ensure that I don't go off of the edge of the fabric. My needle is in a position of a 7, which takes the needle clear over to the right. So I'm just going real slow and making sure that I stay right along that edge. And this is important to go slow because this stitch, everyone will see it. As they're looking at your shirt, they look around the collar, and you want to make sure your line is nice and straight. Now it's time to add the bottom front. So with your front panel facing up and your bottom panel facing down, right sides together, we're going to pin it in place and then go over to the serger and serge it into place. Here I am serging the bottom piece onto the top piece. Now, if you have chosen to sew and then serge, or simply sew and then zigzag, this is the time to do so. I ironed this seam down, and now I'm going to top stitch it into place. Repeat this process for the back piece. Now it's time to put our sleeve in. With our shirt facing up and our sleeve facing down, right sides together, at the shoulder seams we are going to pin the shoulder of the sleeve to the shoulder area of the shirt. And I always start at the center and then I work my way down the side and I pin until I get to the end, and then I go over to the other side and pin that end. Your shoulder inset should look like this. Now these pieces are identical, so you do not have a front and a back or a right and a left, so it doesn't matter which shoulder piece you pick up. Then at the serger, I go ahead and serge these pieces together. Next, using a ham, that's the rounded thing that I have there, I go ahead and I iron my shoulder seams down. Now you can do this if you don't have a ham. You can lay it flat and iron it. It's just so much easier and well worth the investment. I also chose to top stitch my shoulder seams down. I don't normally do this, but since my seams include some doily stuff there, the lacy stuff, I wanted to make sure that I had it extra secure within my seam so it doesn't come undone. We're getting to the finish line. Now it's time to sew our side seams. So with right sides together, match up the sleeve seams and then pin all the way down. All the way down your sleeve and then all the way down your shirt. It should look like this. After you serge your seams, now it's time to press. This is called a sleeve ham, so that you can press along the seam and then eventually go into the sleeve and press the seam with ease. Once again, this is a wonderful tool that's well worth the investment. Here I'm working my way into the sleeve. And then I'm just going to slowly press so that I don't make any more wrinkles than I have to, and it's just wonderful. Here I'm slowly working out to the other end of the sleeve. Now there's one last step. On each of the sleeves, I went ahead and serged around the bottom. And at the sewing machine, I added a nice top stitch around the sleeve opening so that I would have a nice finished look. I love, love, love how it turned out, and I hope you do too. Here are some pictures to show different views. Please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.